Define time. I'm going to stop you right there. I know what you're going to say. You're going to say something with minutes, seconds, hours, years. I want you to define time without using finite units. No seconds, no minutes, no hours, nothing like that. Now, you might reference the passage of events such as the sun going up and down. What if there was no sun? What if you were in a place where nothing ever changes? How would you define time? Now, there's a lot of people out there, they have a lot of ideas of what time is. It's an illusion, it's a human construct, this, and that, and in ways they're all right. But now I want you to imagine something else for me. Imagine eternity. Imagine something that never begins and never ends. Or do your best to come up with the closest human facsimile to that possible, because it's not something that we are equipped to understand. But my point is, the way we think of time is always in finite units. Now you're in that place where nothing ever changes, it's always exactly the same, stuck with your thoughts. How do you know if you're there for 30 seconds or 30 million years? You don't. How long is it before the lack of input causes your mind to destroy itself? And what if the only thing standing between you and that fate is the hope that anesthetics continue to work throughout the process? That's what today's story explores. This is The Jaunt by Stephen King. Now, typically, right here is where I would read a small section of it that I thought was particularly good, but the section I've chosen, if I read now, would kind of ruin the story for you, so we're going to hold that off until the end. Now, what's the basic idea behind this story? Humanity, sometime in the 80s, invented teleportation. Now, you may wonder, what the heck does that have to do with anything you just said? Well, be patient, I'll get to it. And the framing device for the story is a father telling his two kids and his wife the story of how this was invented and the things that could possibly go wrong with it. And let me tell you about my connection with this story. This is one of the most upsetting stories Stephen King ever wrote. I remember the first time I read it, I was like, and that is extremely rare for me. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to sit here and pretend I'm not afraid of everything. Everybody's afraid of something, but it's very rare that a story has that psychological and visceral an effect on me. In fact, the only one I can think of in recent years was an analog horror story called Radar. As per usual, I'm going to give you a plot summary, and I'm going to tell you, you should read the book first, because the book's going to be better than my plot summary. All the plot summary is really going to do is maybe help you catch a few things you didn't. And you can find this story right here on YouTube in several different audiobooks. It was very easy for me to find to refresh my memory. Yes, I do use audiobooks when I make these videos. It's easier to take notes, and there's nothing wrong with using audiobooks. Now, I often find myself thinking, whenever I reread this one, I wish Stephen King had done more hard sci-fi. I wish Stephen King had done more of those dark, futuristic stories that take like these basic sci-fi elements and turn them into something that could be pure evil and terror. I'm not the only one who thinks so either. I've talked to a few friends about this who are heavy readers like me, and they feel the same way. But I'm going on another tangent here. We'll talk about that in another video. Let's get to the plot summary of The Jaunt. First thing I want to say is, and I want to once again remind you guys that you can find this story for free on YouTube, on Internet Archives. Anyway, I do recommend reading this one first. I recommend that with all these stories, and once you're done, come back and we can discuss it. But if you really don't want to do that, I'll just give you the story. So we start off with the framing device. It's a father telling his two kids and his wife the story of how the jaunt came to be. They're preparing themselves to take a jaunt. For most of them, it's the first one they've done. Now, I know you keep hearing this word jaunt. You're wondering what that means. Some of you have already put it together. We'll get to that in a moment. One of the kids is very excited, the son, Ricky. Mark, the father, can see that, and it makes him a little nervous, and it should, but we'll get there. The daughter's terrified. The wife is a little bit scared, but putting on a brave face for the kids. Now, he begins to explain to the kids what the jaunt is. He's done it maybe 15 times now. I think that's what they said. But again, this is their first time. The jaunt is teleportation. That's exactly what it is. In fractions of a millisecond, you can get from one place to another, regardless of distance. Sounds pretty great, right? Well, you might change your mind. They're at a terminal. It's kind of like an airport for jaunting, and what happens there is they're going to sit down on what they call these jaunt couches, and they're going to be pushed through the portal. And walking around are these people who are going to give them anesthetic gas so they sleep through the trip. We'll get to why shortly. And I love the fact that they refer to them as gas passers. I love Stephen King's sense of humor. I always have. But the dad begins to tell them the story. They've got all kinds of questions, and who wouldn't? It's teleportation. Of course you have questions. Are you the same person on the other side? Are you just a recreated copy of that person and you die in the process? You know, the Star Trek problem. But that's not really the case here, because you can remain conscious through the trip, and we'll get to what happens in a moment. Spoiler alert, it ain't pretty. So the dad begins telling the story of how this happened. Now, this is the 24th century where these people live. But 300 some odd years earlier, during the 80s, a scientist rather, was experimenting with this. He was trying to invent teleportation, which sounds completely insane, and it is. We haven't come up with that yet, and we're 30 to 40 years past what happened in the book. I think it was the end of the 80s. 80s. And we still don't have the jaunt. I'm a little upset about that. Well, maybe not. So this guy is experimenting in kind of a shed. He's got a pretty makeshift setup, and he's got some government grants and so forth, about, I think they said $15,000 a year to study this, which even in the 80s is not that much because you got to live off that. You got to buy equipment with that. But he also mentions that most of the things he needs to experiment with this, you can buy at a hardware store for a low price. Basically, what we have here is technology Frankenstein. And he's been experimenting with this for a while, playing around with the electronics and so forth. But one day, he does it by accident. He teleports by accident. Thankfully, it's only his first 3 fingers. He looks down to see, as he puts his hand through where the portal should be, that the tips of his first 3 fingers are missing. And he can see them on the other side of the room. He very quickly pulls them back, expecting to see blood, and actually kind of hallucinating that there is blood because it's just such an obvious expectation, but it worked. Now, our mad doctor is pretty happy about this, obviously. He finally did it. This thing he read about in a sci-fi book once is something that he had created. So, of course, he's going to jump on to experimenting on live creatures. Now, as the dad's telling this story, every so often he gets real nervous about what details he should give to his kids because it gets pretty gruesome. But science, especially testing on animals, always gets pretty gruesome. So he runs to a local pet store to buy some mice. He pulls one out, picks it up, and goes to put it through the portal. The mouse obviously doesn't want to go. I don't know if the idea was that the mouse knew something that he didn't. It seems like they tried to avoid it, or if it was just that the mice were being mice and doing what they wanted to do. But he tries to get the mouse through, and it bites the web of his finger. It gets away. He manages to grab it by the tail, but it slips out into the crack of the wall. That, my friends, is the luckiest mouse in the world. Except for maybe Mickey Mouse. That guy's a billionaire. So he tries again. This time he's wearing a glove. He treated the wound, and he goes to put another mouse through, and this time manages to get it to go through. The mouse goes from the spot where it was to the other side of the room. It worked. It teleported. He runs over gleefully to check on this mouse to see how it's doing. Its breathing is slow. Its eyes are glazed over. It looks like it's just aged 1,000 years in 1 minute. The mouse falls to its side and dies. The doctor's like, well, that's strange. He has no idea what happened to this mouse. His fingers went through just fine. He sent several objects through. He sent his watch through, and no significant amount of time alteration happened. So he thinks maybe there's something that's, damaging their organs, rearranging their organs, doing something he doesn't understand. So he sends another couple of mice through. One just dies. One actually takes a few steps and then dies, but they all seem to die. He takes another mouse, and he puts it through butt first. Sees the butt on the other side of the room, sees the mouse. He can see the organs laid out, and he thinks, if we can't use this for teleportation to make a great medical diagnostic tool, he's not wrong. I mean, you can check how everything's working without having to cut anybody open, so yeah, why not? But he pulls the mouse back through, and that mouse is fine. And this is where he figures it out. It's something they're perceiving. When their head goes through, when they perceive what happens during the jaunt, what he calls the gulf, it's only fractions of a millisecond, like 0.000, a whole bunch of zeros, 6-7 seconds. Shut up. Don't you dare say it. So he runs into the house. He has a limit on the amount of time he can use the computer they issued him. And, his access to the database ends after a certain amount of hours each day. I'm not sure why that is. I didn't fully understand what the thinking there was. Maybe it costs money to keep the servers up. Maybe it costs money to connect the computer to those servers. This is the 80s. I grew up in for the most part, the 90s and the 2000s when it comes to computers. But anyway, he ran out of mice, so he runs in and gets his goldfish, because of course he does. He's a mad scientist. He puts the goldfish bowl through. One of them's already dead. One of them's just floating there dead. The other one is super lethargic, kind of swimming around slowly, kind of like the mice. But the thing is, the goldfish that survived actually kind of recovers a bit, which tells me that if they don't remember the thing they just experienced, maybe they get better. And here's my question. If that's the case, you know what? We'll talk about it at the end because I don't want to give anything away. But maybe some SCP-style amnestics would be a good idea. So he takes the mice back to the pet shop, and the vet there cuts them open, does autopsies and stuff to see what happened. They're totally fine. Their organs are completely undamaged. Their bodies are perfectly healthy. It's their mind that was affected, which is odd because he mentioned that the mice's eyes had glazed over and stuff like that. So you'd think the eyes would have been fine and it would have been just their body. I don't know if that's maybe there's something I missed. Maybe there's just like a little hole in the writing there. It's okay. It happens to the best writers. But he doesn't know what happens in the gulf, the space between teleporting and coming back. So he reports to the people he's working for. Now, these people are desperate for a better way to travel. Gas prices have gone up to $15 a gallon, and there's such a small amount that people are only allowed to drive 2 or 3 days a week, depending on what their job is. Otherwise, they have to find other ways around. There's a gas monopoly called OPEC. I'm pretty sure that was a real thing. I don't know the history of that. Maybe should have looked into it before making the video, but I don't think it's important enough. The point is, there was a monopoly on all the oil, and the barrel prices were going up and up and up. So, the primary reason they're putting so much stock into this guy is because they need a way to be able to travel and do commerce without paying these people all this money for the oil. So they're rushing him along, and him being a scientist, even a mad scientist, even a total weirdo knows no, we need to put more work into this. So they decide, you know what, we need to test this on a human. Okay, all right. Evil government scientists, do your thing. And they get this prisoner. This prisoner was on death row. The guy's name was Rudy. And they said, you're going to get a full pardon. You do this for us. You help us break this. You help us crack this code. And we're going to give you a full pardon, which to me seems like a terrible idea. I mean, it didn't seem clear whether he was the type of offender that might offend again. It didn't seem clear that they weren't just going to throw him back in jail anyway if he came through on the other side. But he's pretty scared, rightly so, because they told him what was happening. And he says, okay, well, you know, I'm on death row anyway. I may as well. If I die doing this, it's the same thing, right? No. First thing he tells them is, when I come out the other side of this, there better be a chicken dinner waiting for me. You guys think he ate that chicken dinner? There was no chicken dinner, guys. So he steps through. It's, again, fractions of a millisecond that he's teleported for. And he steps out on the other side. Eyes glazed over, hair stark white, just standing there, horrified. And all the scientists just swarm in on him. They're asking, you know, what happened in there? What did you see? What was it? He says 4 words. It's eternity in there. And he dies. He dies. So technically, you know, it was the same outcome, but it seems like what we're building up to is the fact that when you go in there, your consciousness is in there for eternities, like millions of millions, maybe billions of years. It's never quite clear. They don't know because everybody who comes out on the other side is a blithering madman or a madwoman. What it seems like happens is, you know, it takes you apart into your basic particles and moves you somewhere else, and your consciousness experiences eternity in the gulf. Now, over time, as they study this, they realize something. You have to be conscious. You have to be aware while you're going through for this to happen. So what they start doing is anesthetizing people, and they test that, and it works. They come out on the other side perfectly sane. This is a massive breakthrough because when it comes to resources, eventually they all run out. But this could take us to other planets. It could take us to Mars, which is where our main characters are going, by the way. Mark and family are going because they're going to drill for water because they're running out of water on Earth. Because, you know, they ran out of oil and gas prices went way up. Then the new technology they were using started to pollute their water and left them with less and less usable water. We're going to ignore the real life parallels there because I don't want to think about it. But anyway, yeah, they're planning on going to drill the Martian ice caps to get fresh water to bring back to Earth. And they give this metaphor that I really like. It's like crossing a stream without getting your feet wet. They're going to head out to Mars and build a jaunt point. They're going to head out to other planets and build more jaunt points. And it's going to be like putting a rock down in that stream and you step on it. You grab another rock and put it in front of you and step on that rock. You grab the previous rock and do the same. Now, this story came out a long time ago. Video game terminology wasn't exactly commonly used, but I like to think of it as setting fast travel points. That just makes a little more sense in the modern world. So anyway, they're celebrating, they're happy, and oil prices drop dramatically. OPEC gets dissolved. They're sending packages via jaunt. We're moving into the 21st century fast, and then the 22nd century, and so on and so forth till we reach the 24th century, which is where we are now. Now, as time goes on, this guy, you know, he's giving speeches about things and stuff, but everybody has this theory, and this is just kind of a little side quest, but I did want to mention it because it's interesting. And the dad himself believes this, that it wasn't the same guy. They got a lookalike to give these speeches, and they just told this guy, you know, get out of the public eye. And I guess they probably would have been afraid of him telling them about the Gulf. So they probably paid him off, told him, you know, go live a private life, we'll take care of the rest. But that's just a little side quest. That's just a little side content. And as the jaunt takes off, the dad starts to think about bad actors, people who used it for the wrong reason. And this kind of reminds me of any modern technology, really. Anything that can be used for bad, there's going to be people out there who use it for bad. One scientist decided he was sick of his wife and tossed his wife into the jaunt portal, only he set the output to null, meaning he didn't know where she was going. She probably didn't go anywhere. She's probably jaunting for all of eternity. And there really might not be a difference because, again, it's eternity in there. But he was put on trial for this, obviously, put on trial for murder. And his lawyer defended him saying, you know, we don't know that she's dead. We don't know where she is. We don't know that he killed her. So how can you try him for murder? And they did the sensible thing and put him to death because, yeah, that's worse. That's worse, guys. And there was also some talk of the mafia using it to dispose of things they shouldn't have. You know, little things where he said, like, you know, a quarry can hold so many bodies and they always float back up. Toss them into the jaunt portal, they're gone forever. And I gotta tell you, the mafia taking the people that they offed in order to, you know, keep their things a secret, they're not as bad as that scientist because those people aren't suffering for all of eternity. But in the meantime, just to sum up some other details that come up, they've got bases on Venus. I can't even begin to tell you how that works. Apparently, Venus has enough oil to supply the Earth with what it needs for several 100,000 years, but they don't really use oil anymore because they have the jaunt. Oil is kind of thought of as a toy like it was during the early eras of the Industrial Revolution, like, you know, when cars were just a toy and horses were still the main thing. So the daughter in the current time keeps asking him, you know, what happened to the mice, and he doesn't want to tell her because she's scared. The son is just excited to hear all these details, which is going to be a problem. We'll get to that. And they make it to the front of the line where they're going to be jaunted. So they have all these jaunt couches laid out. That's what they call them. I just imagine, like, for some reason, I imagine like a movie theater chair. I know that's not really a couch, but that's what I imagine. And the way it works is you sit down on the couch, they gas you, they put you to sleep, and they kick you through the portal, and you come out on the other side. They're heading to Mars, like I said. So one by one, they're putting their jaunt couches and they're jaunted. And this is where we get to the climax and end of our story. And you know what? I'm going to read this last part to you verbatim, because it's one of the best sections of any Stephen King short story I've ever read. It'll give you chills. So Mark comes out on the other side. He starts waking up from his sleep, and he hears screaming and a lot of noise and a lot of chaos. And he goes to see his son, who is the source of all that screaming and chaos. And now we're just going to continue with the final lines of the book. It hadn't been fright in Ricky's eyes. It had been excitement. He should have known, because he knew Ricky. Ricky, who had fallen from the highest crotch of the tree in their backyard in Schenectady when he was only 7 years old, who had broken his arm and was lucky that was all he'd broken. Ricky, who dared to go faster on his slide board than any other kid in the neighborhood. Ricky, who was first to take any dare. Ricky and fear were not well acquainted. Until now. Beside Ricky, his sister still mercifully slept. The thing that had been his son bounced and writhed on its jaunt couch. A 12-year-old boy with a snow-white fall of hair and eyes which were incredibly ancient, the corneas gone a sickly yellow. He was a creature older than time masquerading as a boy. And yet, it bounced and writhed with a kind of horrid, obscene glee. And at its choked, lunatic cackles, the jaunt attendants drew back in terror. Some of them fled, although they had been trained to cope with just such an unthinkable eventuality. The old young legs twitched and quivered. Clawed hands beat and twisted and danced down the air. Abruptly, they descended, and the thing that had been his son began to claw at his face. "Longer than you think, Dad," it cackled. "Longer than you think." Held my breath when they gave me the gas. Wanted to see. I saw. Longer than you think. Cackling and screeching, the thing on the jaunt couch suddenly clawed its own eyes out. Blood gouted. The recovery room was an aviary of screaming voices. "Longer than you think, Dad. I saw. Long jaunt. Longer than you think." It said other things before the jaunt attendants were finally able to bear it away, rolling its couch swiftly away as it screamed and clawed at the eyes that had seen the unseeable forever and ever. It said other things, and then it began to scream. But Mark Oates didn't hear it, because by then he was screaming himself. Now that right there is some of my favorite writing Stephen King has ever done, because that just bites right through. You can say what you want about Stephen King, but you cannot deny his storytelling abilities. The way he comes up with the ideas that he does, and the way that he communicates them to an audience, it's very human. It's not like Lovecraft where there's all this flowery language around it, and it's not like Cormac McCarthy where every sentence, despite being extremely simple, is deliberate and built in exactly the way he wants it. Stephen King, he writes. He tells you a story. And that makes this section, to me, so much more intense. It almost feels like somebody telling you what they saw, what happened to them. So there's a few little sections I want to point out here. I have no freaking clue what a slide board is. I have heard people refer to parts of trees as crotches, and I almost did laugh when I was trying to read that because I'm me and, I have that sense of humor. And another thing is, like, eyeballs freak me out. Anything with eyeballs being damaged or torn out. So this section was like tailor-made to freak me out. And because of that, this is one of my favorite Stephen King short stories, bar none. So let's get on with the analysis. We got the basic idea of the story, and what is the story saying? What are the things we can take from this? First and foremost, people are always afraid of new technology. Now, there is something that can go wrong here, but it's very easily preventable. If you're not stupid enough to not take the gas, you'll be through this just fine, and you'll save yourself a several-month space flight, several days of flight, and you're through it in just a second. You take a few hours to get over the anesthesia, boom. Instead of having things delivered in 2 days by Amazon, you have them in the next moment. That's what I'm getting out of this. This is good technology, but bad actors and stupid people make it seem bad. The kid being stupid, yes, I know, he was just a kid, but come on. You don't usually have to tell a kid, don't touch the stove while it's hot. Some kids you do, unfortunately. And this brings me back to a point I made during the plot summary. One of the goldfish seemed to forget what it had gone through, and I think that was, at least that's how I interpreted it, and I think that was intentional, because, it's the old cliche, goldfish have a 5-second memory. They have a much longer memory than that, but I think that's what we were trying to be told. Unfortunately, Stephen King didn't really do anything with that side plot line there that, if you forget, you'll be okay. But it seems to me like with this eventuality in mind, people are trained for this. Why don't you have some kind of amnestic, something you can give these people to make them forget? Because it's still just a memory. You get rid of it, they'll probably be fine. And a few other things I wanted to point out here, especially some connections to the greater Stephen King universe. There is a name for the space between realities, which to me seems like what they traveled through here. It wasn't established yet, but they call it, what somebody said in one of my videos in the comments, let's take a shot every time he says toe dash space. Let's not do that, but they call it toe dash space, and it's shown in different ways throughout the Stephen King universe. There are different parts of it. It's where it lives, Pennywise, the monster. And we do see a similar kind of idea in the book It and in the movies when they see the creature's true form, they see the deadlights, their hair goes stark white. They've seen eternity. So I think it's a similar idea here. I think they went through toe dash space and they either saw eternity, they might have seen it or a thing like it, or they might have just been in a particularly long tunnel through toe dash space. And throughout Stephen King, there are areas in space that are thinner that allow you to travel through toe dash space, either to different areas or different times. That's called a thinny. So what the professor was actually making was a thinny. Again, these concepts were not established at the time. And whenever I have these discussions with people, you get someone who says, no, that's not what it was because those concepts weren't established yet. It's called retroactive continuity. That's a thing, all right? So yes, it was toe dash space. It was a thinny. Get over it. But I do think we could take some good lessons from this. Like, again, good technology being ruined by bad actors and stupid people. Like Tide Pods. Tide Pods are great. You don't have to measure out different levels of anything. You just toss it in there. But of course, some moron teenager ate one. Maybe I'm getting the wrong thing out of this story. But, everything's open to interpretation. So, whatever. And I think the other lesson is this. What I mentioned in the opening to this video. Can you handle eternity? No, you can't. Nobody can. You would lose your mind completely. What happened to Mark would probably happen to you. And those real life parallels are still freaking me out. Like the idea gas prices are going up. They're starting to pollute their water. Why does everything in recent years have to be a historical event? But if you guys want to get a copy of this, if you're physical media collectors, this is in Stephen King's short story collection, Skeleton Crew. If you want to read it yourself and you haven't yet, you can find it on YouTube as an audiobook. You can find it on the Internet Archive. I would encourage you to pick up a copy of the book if you do read it for free because, Stephen King's a good guy. I don't think he cares that people are reading his work for free or listening to it on YouTube because the guy's rich and he's not greedy. He's got all the money he's ever going to need. He says all the time, I want the government to tax me more. He gives a lot of money to charity. He doesn't care about money, but still, out of respect for him, pick up a copy of the book. I hope you guys enjoyed this one. The next longer book I'm going to do is another Stephen King book called Later. I started reading it recently. I found it randomly and it's very good. I'm also going to be doing a deep dive into the lore of Legacy of Kain, and I really want to thank our constant viewer, Aaron. We've been doing very well as far as contributions go to building this into a full-time thing for me and helping me build, a better studio, better channels, be able to provide you guys with better content. And out of all of those contributions, Aaron gave by far the most generous one, and I don't want anybody to think that I appreciate theirs any less because of this, but this one needed to be shouted out. So Aaron, if you see this, thank you very much for that contribution. We're going to be working on the studio with that money. I ain't gonna lie, I treated myself a little bit. Sonic Racing Crossworld was on sale and I bought it. And that's the B-roll you guys have been seeing through this video. Because I've kind of been dying for a kart racer that wasn't Mario Kart because I don't want to buy the Switch 2. Tangents, Matt, tangents. Anyway, thank you, Aaron. Thank you, all of my contributors. We will, of course, as always, have the thank you section at the end of the video. If you want to contribute to making this full-time for me, getting more and better content. I also have a link in the description to my Ko-Fi page. Ko-Fi. I don't know how to say it. Ko-Fi. It looks like Ko-Fi. It's spelled like Wi-Fi. It's Ko-Fi. Sorry, that's been bugging me. Also, if you check my link tree, I'll also link that down in the description. There are other ways you can contribute as well. You're, of course, not required to. If you're just enjoying my content, that's thanks enough for me. Thank you very much. Ve Victus, save awesome. We'll see you next time. Let me know down in the comments what other stories you'd like to see me cover.